Director Demaurice Smith spoke to USA Today on Wednesday and said the goal of the players' union is to emphasize the underlying issues in treatment in the early phases of the drug program rather than getting players to stop smoking weed. Stephen A., do you agree with Demaurice Smith and his stance on marijuana?
Absolutely not. I think it's a disgraceful stance, but I do understand why he has to make it, because he represents the players, and on behalf of the players, clearly there are issues, and you have to do whatever you can to protect them. So this is not to knock Demaurice Smith in any way. He's simply doing his job as a union leader, but it doesn't make it any less disgraceful. Let's be very, very clear. 87 players have been suspended for substance abuse in the National Football League over the last 3 seasons, totaling $66.9 million in losses. I don't know about you, Max, but I've never seen a joint that cost that much. Never in my lifetime. Josh Gordon lost $1.4 million last year just because of weed. Lord knows how much money others have cost, but we know collectively, cumulatively, $66.9 million in salary have been lost because you can't stay off the weed. That makes no sense whatsoever. And we can sit up there and talk about how it alleviates pain and all of that other stuff. I got all of that. Everybody's got a doctor. Go to a doctor. Get it prescribed for medicinal purposes, and maybe, just maybe, I'll have an argument. But when we talk about weed being used recreationally, and ultimately it elevates itself to addictive proportions, and then the union wants to slide in the back door and say to the NFL, let's make sure we recognize this, not just when they get caught, but let's decipher the difference between you using something recreationally or you being addicted or you having a health issue or whatever the case may be. I'm willing to hear that argument if it's health related. If it is not health related, and by health, I mean a doctor prescribing it for medicinal purposes. You have some cancer patients that use it for medicinal purposes and beyond. Something like that, I'm all ears. Outside of that, I'm sorry, last time I checked, we all have to exact and exercise and employ discipline in our chosen profession. There's a lot of things I would want to do at work that I can't because it's work, and ESPN doesn't want to allow it. The same might be with you, Molly, or you, Max, or others. I don't want to hear that nonsense. It's absolutely positively embarrassing that this is a subject that is being addressed. It's flat out embarrassing.
You are so wrong about this. In fact, I find that stance embarrassing, Stephen A., and I will tell you why. It's all based on the premise that marijuana is something it's not. Now, the policy in the NFL will weed out, so to speak, the real addicts. Absolutely. And those people have a problem. They are addicted to marijuana. I agree. Whatever the claim is about the addictive properties of marijuana, psychologically or in some other way, they can't give it up because they're jeopardizing enormous financial security, et cetera, in their professional careers. So they have a problem. The only reason we know why they have a problem is because they have an absurd law that should, a rule that should actually be illegal in the first place. And what Demaurice Smith is saying and the players' union is saying is, let's look at if for that pool of addicts, let's look at the underlying causes of the addiction. Since marijuana, from a medical sense, from a scientific sense, doesn't have addictive properties. So it's something in the person's personality. They're self-medicating, maybe it's for pain, depression, etc. Let's look at that. Now, do I think that that even needs to be done? No. You know why? Because the only reason marijuana is perceived and treated the way it is because the federal government has been lying about it or else willfully ignorant about it since Harry S. Anslinger, the drug czar, continuing through Jeff Sessions, the current attorney general. They have either been willfully ignorant or lying about it. It is not a Schedule I drug. It is technically because of those political lies, essentially, but it is not in terms of the science. Any of the science, none of it, should it be classified as Schedule I drug. It should be treated, if anything, like alcohol, which, again, according to every measure, is actually worse for you and for society than marijuana. Now, if someone's misbehaving and breaking rules in another sense, and they look into it and it turns out it's alcohol-related, they may have to go into an alcohol problem. But alcohol in and of itself isn't tested for. They don't randomly go in and test for alcohol. And by the way, half the states in this union now realize the bogus claim that marijuana should be treated differently than alcohol. But at a federal level, it still isn't. The NFL doesn't have to pay attention to that. They choose to be lockstep with stuff that is simply unscientific, that is untrue. while they're in bed with alcohol companies, they're peddling it on TV during the commercials. They're business partners with drug companies, essentially, that peddle a much worse and more destructive drug than marijuana. They don't randomly test for alcohol. What you're talking about, Stephen A., these players are being busted not for bad behavior, but for violating a policy that shouldn't be there in the first place. And sure, if you put that policy in, you will weed out the hardcore addicts. Yes, just as you would if you put an alcohol policy in.
That's that level right there of alarm and ignorance that should concern us all. I don't want to hear that nonsense about what rules should be in. There's a whole bunch of rules that shouldn't be in, and not just in the world of professional sports in corporate America, but they are what they are. Those who have the gold make the rules. That's the way it goes. If you don't like it, go someplace else and collect a check from a different source. It's just that simple. When you look at, and by the way, I wish you and others would stop making this argument that I am making the case that, oh my goodness, stay off the weed, but feel free to drink all the alcohol you want. I'm not saying that. As far as I'm concerned, the NFL are a bunch of flaming hypocrites. They should get rid of alcohol just like they get rid of marijuana. I'm not making a call one over the other. I'm simply saying what the rules are, the rules are. And if you know these rules are in place, I go to a different level. I don't go all scientific like you do, Max. I'm simple in this regard. Excuse me, the rules are in place. Is smoking some weed worth millions? Yes or no? And when these guys who grew up poor in large proportions made the ultimate sacrifices to their bodies, their minds, on behalf of themselves and the upliftment of their families, are willing to jeopardize all of that because they can't stop puffing, I got a problem with you because you blowing everything you work for. What do you mean that's what it's about?
That's what the union... The players' union is essentially saying, look, you should, like, when you say, well, those...
But that's why I didn't blame them.
But that's what the CBA is. It's a negotiation as to what the rules should be. And what the players' union is saying is, if you're going to keep this absurd and hypocritical rule, then at least let's tailor it to make some sense. Instead of just saying, bad addicts don't work, why don't we address the underlying causes of the addiction if we're going to weed out the addicts in the first place? That's all the players' union is saying.
But that's why I did not say, that's why I did not blame Demaurice Smith. You represent the players. You're their union leader. I get it. I understand it. That's why I absolved him from my diatribe. All I'm saying is this. You got the NFL. They're talking about being an institution, a multi-billion-dollar conglomerate. It's not just about football. It's about life after football. The span of your career is 2.5 to 3 years and all of this other stuff. But you're going to have dudes rolling around all over the place, all high, or high off the weed, and then all of a sudden, you're going to sit up there and go like this. Well, we want you to know that we're sensitive to what ails you. We're sensitive to what plagues you. But you're going to send them out in the real world in 3 years when you made it okay for them to get puffed up and high and all zooted out? That's stupid.
They're not
That's
talking
nonsensical.
about getting high in the workplace. They're talking about, just like they're not talking about drinking in the workplace.
After work, Stephen A. They're going to get high after work.
Really? So you're going to get high in the afternoon. So you're going to be all right. Hold on, Max. I just want to be clear. So you're going to be all right. I just want to be clear. You're going to be all right while you practice it. But you're going to go home after Sunday after the game or a week later, whatever the case may be. And it's all right to be high. Oh, by the way, it's all right to continue to get high during the off season when your career span is 2 to 3 years. What kind of a citizen are you going to be?
The only reason it's a problem is because it's a rule against it in the first place. That's what they're trying to negotiate.
Gotta leave it there. Sorry, Max, but what I deduced from this conversation is that if you blow, you can blow everything. On that note, the Splash Brothers...
Let me come on first take, Max.
...turned Crash Brothers as Steph and Clay can't buy a bucket last night. Should the Dubs be worried about losing the #1 seed after losing back-to-back games for the first time in 2 years? And up next, all-pro running back of the Steelers, Le'Veon Bell, will join us. Will he finish his career in the Steel City? We'll ask him that next. First Take.
If you lucky, first take, stop me. 4 takes, that's you. 3 takes, not me. 2 takes if you lucky. First take, got me.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into First Take on a Feel Good Friday. And look who is here.
I'm back.
Woodson is in
What's
the
he-
building.
what-
The
what
Super
is-
Bowl.
back.
Hold it.
Always a pleasure,
Right
Darren.
off the
Hold it.
He's
Hold
already-
on.
He's
Hold
already
it.
chirping.
Hold on.
I
Hold
already
on.
hear him.
Little bird.
Hold
Yes,
on.
yes.
Hold on. What the hell is he doing here this early?
I
Why
upgraded.
is Darren Woodson, a cowboy,
Yeah.
starting off first take? Security? Where's security? Where's
Sitting in your-
security?
Hey, Max, I'm sitting in your seat too, Max.
Oh, Lord.
Appreciate you, Max.
See that?
Steve
Oh,
A.
y'all
Yeah.
bosom
Well,
buddies
listen.
now.
Listen, when the cat's away.
Going on?
Yeah. We know when the cat's away. How are you guys feeling this morning? You're already feisty, I can tell.
I was all right until I saw him,
Yeah,
a cowboy,
whatever.
starting off the show.
Haters.
I know
go.
Stephen A. and I are about to butt heads on a bunch of stuff, so I can't wait.
Okay, cool. Darren, do you want to start the show?
Let's do it.
Okay, we'll start it then because Darren wants to. There is a youth movement in New York. The Jets add Brandon Marshall to the list of veteran players that will be released. First reported by Newsday, then confirmed by our Adam Schefter. So a source close to Marshall told Schefter that the Jets offered a contract extension with no pay cut, but they eventually decided to part ways and not to trade him. So Marshall joins Revis, Nick Mangold, and Nick Folk as offseason salary cap casualties for the Jets. The move can't become official until the new league business year, which starts March 9th, right around the corner at 4 p.m. Eastern. Hall of Famer Bill Polian with a hot take on Gang Green.
Don't forget, next year in the draft is a good quarterback year. Shall we say that maybe they're reloading with the idea that this year may not be a terrific year
Are they doing the
record-wise?
Sixers thing and tanking, Bill?
Well, I don't want to say that. But we saw the Browns do it with no repercussions, by the way. So who knows? Maybe it's an objective. It's hard for me to believe in New York. And the moves they've made thus far have been justified without question.
And you believe the Browns tanked this year, then?
There's no question about it. They said it. They didn't care about the won-loss record. They said it, and there were no repercussions.
So the Jets are clearly getting younger and save $43.4 million against the cap. But Stephen A., are they making the right moves?
Well, listen, I think they're making the right moves in terms of Brandon Marshall because, again, if you don't have a quarterback, you got a problem. Ryan Fitzpatrick obviously had a very, very good year the year before last. This year, in part due to how the Jets handled things, particularly in training camp and what a holdout they allowed them to be and how they left so many things dangling, really disrupted their rhythm, their flow, their momentum. And as a result, that, as far as I'm concerned, that relatively sabotaged their season. Ryan Fitzpatrick comes in late in training camp. Ultimately, he takes a while to get going. You look at Eric Decker, he goes down. Matt Forte wasn't the running back that you wanted him to be. The offensive line wasn't what it used to be, particularly with the retirement of DeBrickashaw Ferguson. So you take all of those things into account. Remember, Nick Mangold is not going to be back now. But you got to take into account all of those things that were transpiring. So ultimately, it led to acrimony. Remember, your quarterback who was vying for the starting job got his jaw broken because he stupidly got in the face of a 250-pound linebacker he owed money to, if you can believe that. I'm talking about Geno Smith here, obviously. All of those things taken into consideration, they never really had a chance to have a successful season. And so when you look at it from that perspective, and then Darrelle Revis didn't want to be there any longer and played like it. As a result, they've let him go. Now they've let Brandon Marshall go. No doubt they'll probably let David Harris go. They'll probably try to trade Sheldon Richardson as well. You take all of those things into consideration, they clearly seem to be conceding next season. I can't believe I'm saying that in New York. I certainly don't support it, but I do like Bowles. I do like McCagnon. I know that they have some kind of a vision, and I know that they feel somewhat betrayed by the personnel they had in that locker room last year. So to return with all of those bodies intact, I'm not sure I would trust them any more than McCagnon or Bowles or Woody Johnson appears to be trusting them right now. And as a result, with Brandon Marshall, 32 years of age, coming off his worst season, only 59 receptions, targeted 128 times, and still putting up those paltry numbers, that wasn't about his talent because we all know he could play. It was about what he was playing with. He's never been in the playoffs before. He's 32 years of age. He's not going to be an asset to that locker room because he doesn't want to be a part of a rebuilding project. So I think it was the right decision to let him go.
Of course it was the right decision to let him go. And I do support it. Unlike you, Stephen A., the Jets, I don't care, the New York, wherever they're from, as Bill Polian said, Cleveland.